Hello, it's Jules, and it's August of 2026, and welcome to this month's Greater Victoria Real Estate Market Update from Go Real Estate Group. One of the things I find most interesting about today's market is that both buyers and sellers can find reasons to be optimistic. Buyers have more inventory to choose from than we've seen in quite some time, while sellers continue to benefit from steady buyer demand. The spring market has shown us a market that feels more balanced, more predictable, and perhaps a little less stressful than some of the markets we've experienced in recent years. Before we jump into the numbers, it's important to understand what each section of this update is telling us. I'll start by looking at inventory and sales activity to understand supply and demand in the market. From there, we'll look at longer-term sales trends and historical averages to see whether today's activity is stronger or weaker than normal. Next, we'll break sales down by property type, including single-family homes, condos, and townhouses. And finally, we'll look at benchmark prices, which help us understand how property values have been moving over time. Taken together, the charts that I've built will tell us a much more complete story than any single statistic on its own. So let's get started. The Victoria Real Estate Board, or VREB, covers a large geographic region that includes Greater Victoria, the Saanich Peninsula, the West Shore, Souk, and surrounding communities throughout southern Vancouver Island. All of the market statistics we'll be reviewing today, including inventory levels, sales activity, historical trends, and benchmark pricing, come from transactions that occur within the Victoria Real Estate Board trading area. One thing that can sometimes cause confusion is that real estate board boundaries don't necessarily follow municipal boundaries. Areas such as Duncan, Chemainus, Ladysmith, Nanaimo, Parksville, and Courtenay fall under the Vancouver Island Real Estate Board, or VREB, and are reported separately from the statistics we're discussing today. Although this monthly report focuses on the Victoria Real Estate Board region, Wyatt and I regularly help clients throughout Vancouver Island and work closely with trusted professionals in communities outside the VREB area as well. With that context in mind, let's take a look at what's happening in our local market. So this first chart, active listings, let's start with inventory. At the end of July, there were 3,847 active listings on the Victoria Real Estate Board's MLS system. While inventory eased from 4,054 listings in June, it remained above the 3,703 listings available in July of last year. What this tells us is that buyers continue to enjoy a healthy amount of choice throughout much of Greater Victoria. For buyers, more inventory means more opportunity to compare properties and take the time necessary to make thoughtful decisions. For sellers, it means preparation, presentation, and pricing strategy remain critically important. Chart 2 is total properties sold. A total of 673 properties sold across the Victoria Real Estate Board region during July. That's slightly below both June 2026 and July of 2025, but it's still a healthy level of market activity. What's particularly encouraging is that demand hasn't disappeared despite elevated inventory levels. Buyers are still purchasing homes. They're simply taking a little more time evaluating their options. Chart 3 is the 36-month sales trend. This is one of my favorite charts because it helps remove some of the monthly noise. Over the last 3 years, Greater Victoria has averaged 559 sales per month. July came in at 673 sales, which is well above that average and suggests buyer demand remains stronger than the long-term norm. Perhaps the biggest takeaway is how much stronger the market is today than it was at the beginning of the year. Sales activity accelerated steadily through the spring and has remained above average for 5 consecutive months. The chart also shows that Greater Victoria continues to follow a fairly traditional seasonal pattern, with activity slowing during the winter months and strengthening as we move into spring and summer. What stands out to me is that recent sales activity has become more predictable. Instead of sharp swings, higher and lower, we're seeing more consistent performance month after month. Putting things into perspective, monthly sales have ranged from a low of 329 transactions to highs above 750 over the last 3 years. Current activity sits much closer to the upper end of that range than the lower end. Another encouraging sign is that every month since March has been above the 3-year average. That's exactly the kind of consistency we look for when assessing the health of a market. The 36-month average acts as a benchmark for what we might consider a normal level of market activity. When monthly sales consistently exceed that benchmark, buyer demand is generally stronger than normal. When sales fall below it, market activity is generally quieter. While the chart doesn't tell us whether conditions favor buyers or sellers on its own, it does provide valuable context for understanding the pace of the market. Chart 4, 10-year historical total sales. Now let's zoom out even further. Historical sales charts help us understand whether current market activity is stronger or weaker than what we might consider normal. Over the last 10 years, Greater Victoria has averaged 7,934 sales per year, which works out to roughly 661 sales per month. July recorded 673 sales, placing activity slightly above that long-term benchmark. As we move out of the spring market and into the fall season, these charts provide important context by showing how current sales activity compares to historical trends and whether market momentum is strengthening, weakening, or holding steady. Chart 5, single-family home sales. A total of 331 single-family homes sold during July. That's up 4.1% compared to July of last year, but down 14.7% from June as the market follows its typical seasonal slowdown through the summer months. Despite the month-over-month decline, detached homes continue to attract steady buyer interest and remain an important driver of overall market activity across Greater Victoria. Chart 6, single-family home 10-year sales chart. So looking at the historical perspective, single-family home sales continue to perform within a range that would generally be considered normal for Greater Victoria. What's interesting about today's market is that we're seeing a clear divide between homes that are priced appropriately and homes that aren't. Overpriced properties are often sitting on the market, while well-priced listings continue to attract strong interest and in some cases multiple offers. So while I would describe today's market as healthy and active, my best guess is that 2026 will still finish below the 10-year average for total single-family home sales. The market is moving, but buyers are being selective and value conscious, which is likely to keep overall sales volume below historical norms. A total of 209 condo apartments sold during July. Condo activity remains an important part of the market, particularly for first-time buyers, downsizers, and investors. While sales were lower than the same month last year, the condo market continues to provide one of the most attainable entry points into home ownership in Greater Victoria. Buyers remain active, but they're taking more time to compare options and evaluate value before making purchasing decisions. Chart 8, Condo 10-Year Sales Chart. Looking beyond a single month, this historical chart helps put today's condo market into perspective. Over the last 10 years, Greater Victoria has averaged approximately 2,451 condo sales per year. While condo demand remains healthy, recent years have generally tracked below that long-term average following the exceptional active market conditions we experienced in 2021. What this chart tells me is that the condo market is still functioning well, but buyers have become far more selective. Well-priced and well-presented units continue to sell, while properties that miss the mark on pricing often take longer to attract interest. Based on current trends, my best guess is that 2026 will finish well below the 10-year average for total condo sales, even though overall market activity remains healthy. Townhouses continue to occupy an interesting middle ground between detached homes and condos. July recorded 82 townhouse sales. This category remains attractive to a wide range of buyers because it often offers more living space than a condo at a lower price point than a detached home. On one side of the market, many first-time buyers and condo owners moving up are looking for the newer 3-level townhome design, typically featuring a garage on and foyer on the main level, an open concept kitchen and living area on the second floor, and 3 bedrooms upstairs. These homes often include a small yard or a rooftop patio, making them an appealing step up from condo living. On the other side of the market, downsizers continue to be an important source of demand. Many aren't quite ready for condo living and still want some outdoor space without the maintenance responsibilities of a detached home. As a result, one-level townhomes, rancher-style layouts, and wider 2-story designs with the primary bedroom on the main floor remain particularly popular. What makes the townhouse segment unique is that it attracts buyers from both directions, creating demand from those moving up the property ladder and those looking to simplify their lifestyle. Chart 10, Townhouse 10-year sales chart. Historical townhouse activity continues to demonstrate long-term demand for this property type throughout Greater Victoria. As affordability remains a consideration for many buyers, townhouses continue to fill an important role in the housing market. Before we move into the benchmark pricing, it's important to understand the geographic areas referenced throughout the real estate market reports. The benchmark prices published by the Victoria Real Estate Board are based on specific regions within its trading area, which covers southern Vancouver Island and the southern Gulf Islands. The trading area is divided into 5 regions, 15 districts, loosely based on municipal boundaries, and 170 map areas or neighborhoods. This map illustrates the 5 main regions: Core, West Shore, Peninsula, Islands, and Malahat. For this exercise, I've chosen to use benchmark values from Victoria Core. Victoria Core includes the municipalities of Victoria, Oak Bay, Esquimalt, and many of the established Saanich neighborhoods that surround the urban center of Greater Victoria. The reason this area is important is that benchmark pricing is designed to measure how the value of a typical home changes over time within a consistent market area. By focusing on Victoria Core, the MLS Home Price Index can track long-term pricing trends using similar property types and market conditions from month to month and year to year. So when we review benchmark prices for single-family homes, condos, and townhouses in the next few charts, I'm specifically talking about Victoria Core rather than the entire Victoria Real Estate Board trading area. Now that we've established that foundation, let's take a look closer at benchmark pricing and what it tells us about the direction of home values in our market. The Victoria Real Estate Board uses the MLS Home Price Index, or MLS HPI, to track price trends. At the heart of the MLS, HPI is the concept of benchmark home, which is a notional home that includes the most common characteristics of a home in a particular property category. By analyzing years of MLS sales data, the MLS HPI estimates the benchmark price of that typical home and tracks how that value changes over time. This provides a consistent way to measure pricing trends across the Greater Victoria market. Each benchmark chart compares the current month's benchmark price with both the previous month and the same month last year. This allows us to see short-term movement as well as longer-term price trends for a typical home in each property category. Chart 11 is benchmark single-family home. The benchmark price for a single-family home in the Victoria Core was $1,311,000 in July. That's slightly below June of 2026 and July of 2025. The trend suggests benchmark pricing continues to soften modestly while remaining historically strong. Chart 12, benchmark condos. The benchmark price for a condo in the Victoria Core finished July at $548,600. Compared to both last month and last year, prices have remained relatively stable, demonstrating resilience despite increased inventory and more options for buyers. Chart 13, benchmark townhouse. Townhouse benchmark pricing finished at July at $857,300. Unlike the single family and condo segments, benchmark townhome pricing remains above the same period last year and slightly higher than the previous month. That continued stability highlights the ongoing demand we're seeing in this segment. My market conclusion: if there's one thing that I can take away from July's numbers, is that today's market is being defined more by choice than pressure. Buyers have options and the ability to make thoughtful decisions. Sellers continue to benefit from steady demand, but presentation, pricing, and preparation matter more than ever. One of the key themes we heard throughout this month's market is that having more inventory doesn't necessarily mean a weak market. What it does mean is that buyers can be more selective, while sellers need to stand out from the competition. Looking at inventory levels, sales activity, historical trends, and benchmark pricing together, the Greater Victoria real estate continues to look balanced, active, relatively predictable, but it feels that it's transitioning into a buyer's market in many segments compared to many of the markets we've experienced over the past several years. As always, every neighborhood, price range, and property type can behave differently. If you'd like to discuss your specific situation, whether you're thinking about buying, selling, investing, or simply planning ahead, we'd be grateful for the opportunity to earn your business. Thanks for spending this time with me today. And whether you're buying, selling, investing, or simply keeping an eye on the market, I hope this information helps you better understand what's happening here in Greater Victoria. If you have any questions about your situation, please don't hesitate to reach out to Wyatt or myself. And until next time, thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.